Right now, the conventional wisdom holds that the Republicans will retake the House while Democrats will just hang on to the Senate. But the race for both chambers of Congress has gotten very tight in recent weeks. That's according to the election forecasting website 538, which calculates an average of all the major and credible polls. As recently as mid-July, Republicans held a 2-point edge in a generic ballot that basically gauges voters' preference for which party they want to see control Congress without regard to particular candidates. But over the last 8 weeks, the race has shifted, and Democrats are now up by a point. But that still doesn't tell us who will come out on top, because the individual races are the ones that matter. Now, a lot has happened in the last few months to change the trajectory of the 2022 campaign, but the question remains, how much do issues like the landmark Supreme Court decision on abortion in late June push voters to the left? The decision and subsequent trigger bans on abortion, which have taken effect in many states, have proved generally unpopular with much of the electorate and has given Democrats an issue around which to rally their base. But then again, most voters are not single-issue voters, meaning most voters are not just going to vote based on abortion. There's also the FBI's search at Mar-a-Lago and seizure of classified documents being held by former President Trump. Typically, midterm elections are a referendum on the current president, not his predecessor. But Democrats are hoping to make the 2022 vote about Donald Trump rather than Joe Biden, who, despite a recent bump in his approval rating, remains unpopular with a majority of the electorate. So while the momentum may be on the Democrat side, that still doesn't tell us what happens in November. The signs for now point to that split decision. There's a pronounced difference between what's happening in the House and the Senate. One chamber clearly favors the GOP, but is getting closer, while the other previously was a toss-up and is now trending more to Democrats. 538's election forecast gave Republicans an 87% chance to win the House back on June 1st, but fast forward to August 1st, and you see the GOP's probability of victory in the fall in the House going to 83%, and then today it's at 75%. So while the Republicans are still a solid favorite, the odds have come down dramatically. Now, you might look at those numbers and say 87 to 75, who cares? But think of it this way. In June, 538 predicted Republicans were roughly 7 times more likely to win than Democrats. Now, they're saying the GOP is only 3 times more likely to prevail. If the next 2 months go like the last 2 months, this race could be neck and neck. And in the Senate, the forecast is even more perilous for Republicans, at least for now. And the trend pretty closely resembled what's happened in the House race. Back on June 1st, Republicans were actually the favorites to win the Senate, according to 538. They had a 60% chance of taking the Senate compared to 40 for the Democrats. But that nearly reversed completely by August 1st, as Democrats became the more likely winners, with their chances shooting up to 56%. And today, 538 believes the Democrats have a 70% possibility of victory, compared to just 30% for the GOP. So why such a stark difference between the two? Well, for one thing, nearly 2/3 of the Senate seats aren't at stake in this election, whereas the entire House is up for grabs every 2 years. So there are fewer opportunities for flips in the upper chamber. But there are other factors at play as well. House elections are confined to a single district, and many times those districts lean clearly one way or the other. Senate elections are statewide, and so they're generally won by candidates who tend to be more moderate and have a broader appeal. Yet this year, Republicans in numerous states nominated more extreme candidates for the Senate, thanks in part to Donald Trump and Democrats who were only too eager to prop these candidates up, thinking that running against far-right candidates in the general election would give them a better chance. The extreme candidates on the right who have emerged from the primaries have caused many Republicans, both publicly and privately, to take a grim view of the party's prospects, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, I think there's probably a greater likelihood the House split than the Senate. Senate races are just different. They're statewide. Candidate quality has a lot to do with the outcome.
That comment got a lot of attention. It was perceived to be a shot at some of the more extreme candidates Republicans have nominated in key swing states. Former President Trump boosted his preferred choices in several key races, Some earned his backing due to their positions as election deniers. Others got his endorsement thanks to their standing as celebrities. None of the celebrity candidates supported by Donald Trump has come under as much scrutiny as Herschel Walker in Georgia. Walker, a football legend who attended the University of Georgia, has gotten nationwide attention recently thanks to a series of gaffes on the campaign trail. He's a first-time candidate for office, sort of lacked some of the discipline of more established nominees. His opponent, Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, originally won the seat 2 years ago in a special election against Republican Kelly Loeffler. This was a seat Republicans could absolutely take. And now it seems Warnock could retain it, may retain it, thanks to the struggles of his challenger. The 538 average shows Warnock with nearly a 2-point edge. And like all the other Democratic candidates we've touched on, he's outpacing Joe Biden's results in the state from 2 years ago. Now, the Georgia race is particularly fascinating because there's a strong chance voters may split the state's two major races. While Warnock is the favorite to hang on to his Senate seat, and we'll see, there are a lot of Republicans who would tell you they disagree with that. Republican Governor Brian Kemp is currently favored to keep his job. He's facing off against Stacey Abrams in a rematch of their contest 4 years ago. And the numbers show Kemp, the Republican, comfortably out in front. Kemp holding a 5-point advantage over Abrams. Donald Trump tried to knock Brian Kemp out of the race by endorsing former Senator David Perdue in the Republican primary. That failed dramatically, with Kemp trouncing Perdue to win his party's nomination. And it's part of increasing evidence that Trump may be hurting the Republican cause in the crucial swing states. Of those 5 Senate races we just looked at, which are all trending Democrat, doesn't mean that they will end up being Democrat, but they've been trending more to Democrats, Republicans might need to win at least 3 and maybe 4 of them in order to retake the Senate. And right now, they're either basically even or down in all 5. So, big picture, where does this leave us and why? Let's ask Bobby Kaple, a Democratic strategist from Georgia. Also with us, Allison Young. She's a Republican strategist out of Pennsylvania. Thanks to both of you for coming on the program. Appreciate it. All right, first, let me start with you, Allison. In terms of the why, right, the big picture here, why do you think we've seen this trend towards Democrats in the last couple of months?
Look, you're absolutely right that this is against prevailing wisdom, right? That we don't expect Democrats to do well during the midterms. But I do think that Democrats are getting a bump post the Supreme Court decision on overturning Roe. And I think that while Republicans also claim to be getting a bump from that because they can say that they delivered on something that they promised, Democrats are seeing more enthusiasm from young voters on this. And so I think that's where you're seeing enthusiasm and momentum that is, because of that decision, is potentially favoring the Democratic candidates.
You know, Bobby, that has been something we hear a lot about, right, is the Dobbs decision and it galvanizing many Democrats, et cetera, and a lot of independent voters. But I don't know. I wonder, could that in and of itself really be having this kind of impact on individual races, right? I'm not just talking about the big picture question of who do you favor more, Republicans or Democrats. I'm talking about in these specific races, it all seems to be trending more Democratic. Is that all, do you think, because, or largely because of the abortion ruling?
I do believe it's largely because of the abortion ruling. I mean, if you looked at that generic ballot that you talked about at the top of the show that favored Republicans back in June, what's happened between June and now that has made a difference? Well, there's only one big thing, because inflation was going up then, gas prices were going up. The economy hasn't changed all that much in the last 4 or 5 months. But what has changed is the topic and the concern from especially women and younger women and suburban women around abortion rights and criminalizing abortion. And I think where you talk to specific cases, not just the generic ballot, look at Kansas. That is a Republican state, deeply Republican state, that rejected a constitutional amendment that would have put more restrictions on abortion in that state. It was a resounding rejection.
Right. But that was a single issue vote. But that was a single issue vote. That was where they were there just to vote on that issue. And that one I get. But I'm still trying to figure out, you don't think it's inflation, you don't think it's, and when I say inflation, I mean the fact that gas prices have gone down significantly since
No.
since June, or the search at Mar-a-Lago, or any of this other stuff that's having the big impact? Sorry, Bobby, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I think it's abortion rights, and I'll tell you why. I'll point to another decision, another election that happened in New York recently, a special election in a congressional race, where privately Democrats had basically written that House race off, the United States House of Representatives race, and the Democrat won. It was a real shocker, and it kind of showed that there is some staying power to this Roe v. Wade decision. Now, again, it is coming up against what was the normal atmospherics for a midterm election like this, where you had a red wave building because of the natural instincts of voters in general in America, where you have the party in power obviously taking heat. And in this case, the Democrats have the House, they have the Senate, and they have the White House. So it is a natural order of things that you're going to have Republicans wanting to come out and vote against that party in power. The same thing happened in 2018 in reverse when Democrats came out and voted against Trump. It wasn't that long ago, keep in mind, that you saw a governor's race in Virginia where Donald Trump had lost by 10 points and the Republican won. That's what kind of kicked this cycle off into this midterm cycle and had Democrats fretting about where the direction of the race was going. Joe Biden wasn't getting things done in Washington as far as signature legislation that he could count on. And then all of a sudden, in June and July, this Roe versus Wade decision leaks. Then it's cemented with reality. There's a decision that comes out, and all of a sudden you start seeing the polls dovetail and shift. And I think it's a direct result.
But Allison, Biden is still pretty unpopular. That hasn't fundamentally changed.
But you know who else is still unpopular in a lot of the country is Donald Trump. And I think that's one of the things that we're not talking about, that in a lot of cases now, people, particularly conservative Republicans who were never really on the Trump train to begin with, are now feeling exhausted and are getting overly aggravated about the president continuing to insert himself into some of these races. And I do think that that's also, in some cases, hurting Republicans.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.